Hey everyone, I'm glad you joined us today. So just a few things to give you a heads up on. If you're on the YouTube channel listening to the podcast, you're going to notice there's no video casting for me, Samantha. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning of the recording. I live in the country and we don't have very much upload because, internet was made for consumption, not contribution. And so I have to record everything locally. And because of that, for technical reasons, there is no recording of my video. So hopefully Elon Musk's Starlink is going to solve that problem when I get on the beta here pretty soon. But I'm sorry if it changes your user experience. It's definitely disappointing to us as it probably is to you. I am going to leave, we did leave Casey's video in so that you could kind of at least interact with her because she's such a cool person to interact with. And I had to record this at the end. So if you're joining us on the podcast, you won't notice any difference because all you're going to hear is great, wonderful voices and two pretty awesome women who are on fire to just make an impact on the world and help those around us doing it. So thank you again for Casey, and thank you all for your patience and understanding. Thank you. Today on the series, we're doing part 1. So join us for that one. And we hope you join us for the other ones. We got together today to talk about what it's like to be a podcaster and pain points and why I went into podcasting to help her with her new metrics app called poddinglabs.com. However, because we just kind of getting to know each other, we went on to quite a few rabbit trails. But if you're like me, you're going to know that the rabbit trails are where all the cool stuff happens. So instead of cutting out all the cool rabbit trails, we thought you would really benefit from hearing them. So we decided for your benefit, you get to be part of the show, and we are going to produce them into a series. And so you may come in at the beginning, the middle, and the part. We'll have some timestamps for you so you can just jump in and whatever interests you. But just so you know that it's going to be spread out to a number of shows from the beginning to the end. And because I'm pretty new at this, it's not necessarily going to flow super perfect where I'm like, this is part 1 and this is part 2 and this is part 3. It's literally the entire length that we're going to cut up into bite-sizable segments for you so you can listen to them at your convenience. And again, I'm so glad you joined us. It's exciting. So world's exciting. And, we get these technical issues. And the best thing to do is just honestly, I did have a pity party for about 10 minutes. I was pretty disappointed. However, it's not going to change anything. So we need to make the best of the situation. And I know that you'll all understand.
Seeking life-changing knowledge? You've stepped into the right place. Welcome to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. In every episode, discover, explore, and grow your personal or professional self with real and relevant knowledge to help you improve your own life and make a positive impact in the world around you. Tune in for honest insights, life advice, inspirational wisdom, and the occasional salty rants, because you are meant to live a better and bolder life.
Hey everyone, it's Samantha Postman with the Bold Perspectives podcast, and I've got a sweet treat for you today. Today in our podcast, we have Juanxi Li from Toronto, Canada. And oh my gosh, she is so amazing. She's got this wonderful energy and she is excited and she is on fire to help podcasters bring their content to the world. She wants to help connect people so that what you have to say can connect with somebody who wants to hear it. And there can be this magic that happens between that connection. So on today's show, she's going to talk about a new pilot program, a new pilot app that she's got out with her partner. So you can find their cool podcast app on poddinglabs.com. Right now, they're accepting beta testers, which by the time we release, they might actually be live. So check it out. And there's going to be quite a bit of information in the content that you can check out as well, so that you can answer some questions. She's doing some research so that they can do a better product. Do a product that's going to fit your needs. Just a little FYI, we get a little off track. So we started to talk, Casey and I have been talking a little bit before this podcast, and we started to connect. And I anticipate that we won't be just talking about her podcast. You are going to learn about crazy things that you just didn't even think. We're going to learn about how people are meant to bloom with the right elements. We're going to learn about why the Me Too movement has affected leadership development for women. We're going to learn about we're going to talk about being a facilitator and interpreter between different types of people in the world. And we're going to talk about what it's like to go through a lot of hardship in your life, and then in your life, and then just to dig in deep and use pain as a way for gain for other people so that you can help grow other people. And so I hope you're going to stay tuned. You're going to listen a lot. You're going to get way more than you bargained for. And I promise, if you're one of those people who like surprises, this podcast is for you, because you're going to be surprised. I mean, we're surprised about what we talk about. So anyway, hope you continue to join. And I'm just going to let Casey talk about a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, and you can get to know her a little bit. So Casey, we're just meeting for the first time on Zoom. I'm so excited to be with you here today. Just a little chit chat that we've had back and forth. I seriously, every time you put something out there, I gain more respect for you and who you are as a person, and what you have in your mind. And I'm excited for the two of us to kind of have a discussion and help each other grow. And what I really love is that we're both learning, and this whole idea of learning in public is maybe something we need to just dive into a little more. So this is a little bit of that. Definitely not a perfect podcaster myself, not very experienced. An experienced speaker, but a podcaster is a little bit different when there's no energy in a room to kind of work off of somebody. So I don't know a ton about you other than what you want to talk about. So I'd love to hear about you. So tell me about yourself. Tell me what brought you here today, and what you want people to know.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit about me. I'm Canadian. I've lived here for most of my life, currently in Toronto. I've also lived around the world. So I was in London, UK last year, New York. So I've been around a bit. I'm currently working as a software engineer, but my latest and greatest project, and the one that I'm most excited to talk to you about, is pottinglabs.com, which is something that I started with my co-founder, Tom Essel. And it's meant to be a toolkit for small and independent podcast creators. So do you want me to get a little more into why we're passionate about this space?
Yeah, that's actually one of my questions I have for you.
Yeah. So Tom has his own podcast, actually. It's called Podcast Nuggets. He's been working on it for about a year now. And it's about his experience as a product designer at McKinsey and also at Google. And while he was making this podcast, he noticed that almost all the analytics tools out there are for the benefit of advertisers who want to buy a lot of impressions. But an interesting fact from Andreessen Horowitz is that 80% of podcasts get less than 1,100 downloads per episode, wow, and 50% of them get less than 124. Right. So in reality, the vast majority of podcasts out there are small passion creators who, are really interested in their niche, really want to connect with their audience. And it doesn't make sense for them to be selling advertising because they don't have the audience. And they might not want to sell that advertising at all because they care about the experience, and advertising would take away from that. So we see so much value in this community, in people connecting with other podcast creators and connecting with other audience members that they otherwise might not have found. And we think that if we can solve this tooling gap and make it easier for small podcast creators to find meaningful experiences and help audiences discover them as well, that there's actually a lot of value to be found there. And we are starting by interviewing every single person that we know who has a podcast. So family, friends, right. You talked about your podcast on Twitter, so I immediately found you. And I love the fact that when I sent you all my questions, instead of just answering over Slack, you suggested that we do this call out loud and record it. I thought that was just such creativity. And that's the type of solution that we think we'd like to, engender in whatever we come up with.
Yeah, that's funny that you talked about that, because today I was on another call. I'm doing the Ship 30 for 30 content creation challenge. And I had somebody private chat me, and there's like, hey, I have all these questions I want to ask you. And I was like, sweet. Do you mind if we do these over a podcast? Because
yeah,
for me, if we can find ways to learn together and other people can learn from us, that's even better, because we all got to learn. And if I'm going to talk to someone for an hour, let's both leverage it. because my time is super valuable and so is yours. So if we can both find a way to like be efficient with our time, I just thought that'd be super cool. So, and also I really like organic conversations. And if it's too structured, it becomes like a script. Yep. And so that's another reason why, like, if we'd pre-talked, it becomes, okay, let's talk about these 4 things and let's like hone in on this. And then it just becomes a whole marketing campaign just on how you speak.
No, I totally agree. No one wants to hear a scripted conversation. And I think it's always in the space of the crazy unplanned things that you get the most organic and authentic human interactions. So yeah, totally down for however this is going to go.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because I don't know. I mean, we have a base of what we're going to talk about, but I'm super excited to see where this goes. And mostly I'm really excited just to get to know you, because just my interactions with you, I mean, wow, like super impressed with who you are as a person. And I think I said that before, but just your passion for wanting to help. It's not just about creating a product. It's about creating a purpose for people, a purpose for you, but helping other people with their purpose. And whenever I come across people who want to help other people with their purpose, I'm like, dang, we got to connect. I love you already. So like when we can grow each other, that's where the magic happens. So yeah, let's get to it. So this is not a typical podcast style. And I think this might end up being more my podcast style, where people interview me.
Yeah.
Usually like, the podcasters interview people, but I think it's going to be more like an interview me, ask me a bunch of questions, and we'll see what discussion comes out of it.
Yep. No, I think that'll be great. And I think the questions that other people choose to ask say a lot about them as well. So even though it's explicitly an interview of you, I think you're getting a lot of information in the other direction too.
Cool. Great. So let's get to it. You've got some things you want to ask to help you with figuring out how to build your product. Potting lab, right?
Potting labs.
Yeah, potting labs. There is a plural in there. Potting labs. I've checked out your landing page. Oh my gosh, it looks super crisp, sophisticated, enticing. I mean, honestly, it looks like a version of you, to be honest. I was like, oh yeah, I could see her on this. She's like painted all over this.
That is so kind. I'm going to pass that straight on to Tom, who is our product designer. That was 100% him. Not a single line of that code is mine. Okay. But he'll be thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I was super impressed. Really, really impressed out of the gate. So
thank you. That's so kind. But yes, I want to know more about you. And the way that I always start every single one of these conversations is I want to know why you are starting this podcast. What does this mean to you?
Oh my gosh, this is such a hard one. It shouldn't be, but it is. I really bucked it at the beginning for lots of reasons. But at the end of the day, what's one of the main reasons? One, I'm a speaker. I feel like I have a lot to say, and people are always seeking me to talk to me about stuff. Like I get coffee requests constantly. And I can't say yes to them all, even though I'd really love to. And so people started to say to me, why don't you do a podcast, like record these conversations so that more of us can hear them, or we can have coffee with you at home. And, you can speak to us that way. Also, I have really bad arthritis. I have an autoimmune disease. It's kind of a crossover between lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, sort of acts like MS. And so I type super slow. I'm of the generation that didn't really get typing in school. And honestly, if they would put an award out for words per minute, I'd probably be like an Olympian, to be honest. Like I'm going slow right now, but when I get really excited, it's like, and so I thought a podcast would be a really good way to do that. So like get it out there. What I could say in 15 minutes would probably take me 8 hours to type out perfectly. So that's another reason why I want to go with a podcast. Yeah, it's just my medium. I love speaking. And I thought, hey, why not? So I think that kind of covers it. So, this podcast is going to double because I want to be able to create content, because not everybody listens to podcasts.
Yep.
And so I kind of thought it would be a really cool way and very fast way, since I don't type very fast, to create content super fast. So everything we're going to do is going to get transcribed and cross over as blog content. So everything, this entire conversation will be transcribed and then it'll cross as blog content.
Got it. Okay. So that basically answers the next question that I was going to ask you, which is why specifically the medium of a podcast and not blogging or Twitter. But it looks like you're going to use that content again anyway. Now, you mentioned that you have a podcast production company that's doing this. So are they taking on a lot of that work, which would otherwise be a lot of time for you?
Yeah, I run a couple other companies and raising a family. They've turned out pretty great. So I must have did okay. My husband and I did a really great job with them. But you gotta stay whole for them and not you need to be careful with how you spend your time. And I have a really strong finance background, so return on investment is important to me. So yep. If I take that time of like how long it takes me to figure out how to do my digital work and all of, getting, helping me do my descriptions, it actually would cost me more to do it myself. Yep. It would cost me in other areas of my life than what it cost me to have them. So that's why I hired a company. It could possibly be that I take some of that stuff on eventually, but to start out with, I just thought it would help me just create instead of worrying about all the tools about the creation process. So, and partly why I chose them is because they specifically specialize in helping podcasters create blog content, but they also do the recording. So I'm actually going to get YouTube out of it too. And that's why I ended up podcasting, because you can do these little triangles and you're like, well, I'd like to have a blog, but I could maybe do a YouTube later and podcast. And I don't want to do all of them at once, but I was like, wait a minute, what if all I have to do is one of those and it literally feeds off the other ones? I don't really have to do very much. So that's why I chose podcasting first, as opposed to doing blog first or one of those other ones. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, right? You create the content in the way that's most efficient and that showcases like the best natural version of you. And then they'll take care of sort of turning it into these other formats. No, that totally makes sense to me. Cool. So my next question for you is going to be, who do you consider your ideal audience members?
Wow. A person doesn't want to feel like overconfident, I guess, but you want everyone to listen to you. Otherwise, why would you do it? So it's funny because I was reading something about Ali Abdaal, and he was talking about how he's having a hard time with not wanting to be narcissistic. And his coach was like, dude, just creating a newsletter and expecting people to read it is already crossing a few lines. So like, just own it. Yeah. And I struggle with that. Like, who's going to listen? And I read that from him. I was like, okay, yeah, that's really helpful. And so I want people who, at the end of the day, I want people who are learners. I am a lifelong learner. I was born that way since the day I was like the second I could breathe, I think. It's so in me. I can't stop learning. I am in a course. I'm teaching a course. I'm mentoring. Like, I'm volunteering. I'm like an information sponge. And so I want people who are information sponges. Usually that is a young adult age, 18 to 35-ish, because they're really about discovering the world. Oh my gosh, my favorite people in the whole wide world, and I seriously think like we meet in the air or something, are young adults. I'm not joking. It's like we meet in the air. And what I love about them is they're intellectual. They're so intellectual, and they'll intellectually challenge the status quo. I love that because they're not all the way conformed yet. And they're refreshingly idealistic, and they're fascinated with the world. So like a young child is fascinated, but as a young adult, they have tools to explore them, and how they do each one does it is so unique. And so I find people so fascinating, and they're still curious at that age. So I think it'll mostly appeal to 18 to 35. But if you are a lifelong learner, you're curious and you're keen to grow personally or professionally, or just like learn from someone who's been around. There's a little joke in my private circles that I've lived 100 cat lives, and people think I'm exaggerating. And the more they talk to me, like, wow, you're not joking. So yeah. And I guess that's kind of who I'm looking for. Just people who I think is just people who want to grow and learn, and have a growth mindset and aren't afraid to be challenged. Some of the stuff I talk about really challenges culture. Like, there's a few things I'm going to talk about that could, it's going to really rock some worlds about the way I think about the world. And it's going to cause some people to really think about how we've been doing things, especially in Western society. So anyway, that was my long answer. Good.
Loved it. Wait, and any examples of these world shaking topics, or is that a surprise?
Okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you a few. The one, I haven't recorded this one yet, but I have some cross applying theory. And when I cross apply, okay, that just sounds way too technical. I'm just going to say straight up. To be honest, I seriously think that baby strollers are a huge contributor to anxiety in the Western culture.
Wow. Okay. I'm against baby strollers for other reasons, but I want to hear the rest of this.
Okay, but I'm not going to, you have to listen to a podcast. So
Okay.
I want to talk about baby strollers. And I don't think it's going to be what people think it is. And I did record one about, here's another one. I talk about how telling your children or convincing your children that Santa and like the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, convincing them as a child that they're real can lead to trust issues between parents and children and between trust in a culture. And it's done in good fun, but I think there's some underlining issues that can come out of it. And so many people do it because that's what we've been doing in North America, especially, but nobody goes and makes kids believe that Mickey Mouse is real. So I don't understand why we can't do that with Santa.
Yeah. Okay. Sam, like maybe I'm just the crazy one here. Like I just agree with you. Like I think this all just makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited for more of these, but I won't make you spoil the surprise. So
okay,
we'll have to wait till the episodes come out. So your audience, you've done a pretty good job identifying, I think, these people that you just very naturally come across in real life. So I think that totally makes sense as a target audience for your podcast. How do you want to connect with them, and how do you want them to give you feedback on what they think and what they want to hear next?
Well, this is probably gonna be a little bit surprising. I have trouble with niche. Of course, I really dislike boxes, and I I have a love-hate relationship with labels. I love asking people about their background because it really just helps me get a gauge of like, okay, what kind of mindset are they at? How can I connect with them in a meaningful way? So I love that. But I really don't like putting people in a box because I don't like being put in a box. So that's hard for me. So I want to know from people like, what niche would you put me in? And that sounds really crazy. Like as a creator, I'm supposed to say, here's my niche, and I'm just gonna like rock that niche. But I think what I have to say crosses so many sectors and niches, if you will, that I honestly just don't know which one it really fits into. So I want people to tell me, like, what niche do you think this is? And then your other question relating to that was, you might have to help me with that for a second.
It was feedback. How do you want to get feedback?
I'm pretty big about people just doing feedback on an open comments right now. When I do I might be sorry about this. Please, everyone, be really fairly gentle-ish, but on my blog, it's going to be open comment. Because I think that people can cross support each other way more than I could. And so if people want to comment and say, this really resonated with me, or I've been thinking about this, or I'm really pissed at this, then other people will just jump in and they'll support each other because community will. And then I don't have to do all the work. So I want people to jump in and put their thoughts out there, but as a way for feedback so that you all can talk to each other about it, not that you necessarily just have to have a conversation with me. Is that helpful? I'm not sure if that was okay.
No, it totally does. And I think one of the most powerful things about podcasts is that, for example, you can talk to someone else about an episode that you've heard and you have this instant connection because you've both listened to the same thing,
right? Even
though the original podcast creator doesn't necessarily have to be present. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me. Do you have an idea of what kind of feedback would be so important to you that you would personally want to get involved?
Well, I would engage with people. I think that if I felt like we could further the discussion to help more people, then I'd want to be on a show with them. I'm really big about just talking to whoever comes across my path. I really think that the way the universe, and I know this, the way the universe works, there's this like underneath web that we just don't see. And I think Asians are more in tune to it because we kind of understand, but we're all on this trajectory in life. And when we intersect, I think it's for a reason, and we need to stop for a second. What do I have to learn from you? Or what is it that you learn from me? Why are we intersected? So like with us, I was like, okay, there's a clear intersection. So let's capitalize on it. We were brought together for a reason, and let's just go. So if I feel like somebody's come along and the intersection's there intentionally and I'm meant to engage, I'm going to. So, and it might be like, hey, do you want to get a podcast with me and talk about this? Or I might just DM them and talk to them. So, but there's only so much time in a person's day. And as much as I would love to engage in like anyone who DMs me, it's just not physically possible.
Totally get that.
Yeah. My website is going to be set up that you can't just like email me like crazy. Because I do get quite a bit. So if any of you go on my website and you're super frustrated because you don't see this obvious contact me, it is intentional. So you're gonna have to work a little bit if you want to reach out to me. And then, then I know it's worth it.
I think that's totally fair. You cannot scale a high resolution relationship with every single person who wants to interact with you. It's just not feasible. So I totally get that. I want to ask a question about how you're going to measure success. So some people really care about download numbers. Some people really care about booking a really high profile guest. Some people really care about getting mentioned by a big podcast like the Tim Ferriss show, for example. So what would success look like for you?
This is a little bold maybe. Success to me is if Elon Musk direct messages me or calls me and says, I'd really like to pick your brain about something. Or he's like, because I actually have a couple ideas I think you might want to grow. Or there's this really cool Mercedes-Benz put out this avatar car. And I have an idea, like they've got some tech that I think can grow in a way they can't even imagine. I've got an innovative idea and I've run it vetted it through some professionals. So if Mercedes-Benz and they contact me and be like, hey, we heard about you and you've got these ideas, we want to talk. That's success to me. And it's not because it's them specifically, it's because they have the power to do more with it. So for me, success would be taking what I have to offer the world and growing it somehow. So if their listeners are growing something, that means something to me. So I'm going to give you, and I'm going to use this example. It's not for podcasting specifically, but it's sort of like this. A while ago, I was just having one of those days, probably a week or a month, but I'll just call it a day. I was feeling super depressed about, my contribution to the world or my value. We have all those where you're like, man, anyway, it definitely was in not a good mental place about just my value to the world. And I had to go downtown and pick up a piece of jewelry for my daughter's birthday. And it was just the teeniest little shop. I haven't ever been in it. And I drove past it like thousands of times because I live in this city. I'd pop in and teeny little shop, kind of mom and pop jewelry store. And I just needed a little part. And anyway, this lady's there that I haven't seen in forever. And she's like, Samantha, I'm so glad I ran into you. And I'm just so excited. And she used to be a client of mine, actually. And also her husband used to be a chiropractor of mine too. So I know them decently. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, I haven't seen you in years, but I have the best news and it's for you specifically. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, back at like 7-8 years ago when you did my son's tax return and you guys were talking about his future and he was talking about going into medicine. And you're like, dude, you should definitely consider going into rheumatology. There's very few of it, I think you'd be well suited to it. And because of my medical issues, I'm quite privy to the shortage that we have of rheumatologists. And he's talking about wanting to move home. Well, Lethbridge has one of where I'm from has one of the highest senior populations in Canada. And at one point, we didn't even have a freaking rheumatologist. We had like all these seniors sick with bad rheumatology, had to go all the way and drive 2 hours to go to a specialist and back. And so this is kind of what I was sharing with him. I didn't think that much about it. Honestly, I talk to young adults all the time. Yeah. Well, apparently he went into rheumatology and he had just graduated. And she was so excited to tell me that this conversation that we had many years ago literally helped direct him on a path that he was already going, but just helped him figure out which one. And then it just even got better because she's like, and guess what? I'm like, what? And he's just like, well, he brought somebody back with him. And she's a rheumatologist too. And her husband is a pediatrician. So this conversation literally brought 2 rheumatologists to Lethbridge and a pediatrician. And I was like, oh my gosh, God, okay, like you literally just made my day. And that's success. So like if something I say in my podcast will be something like 7 years later where someone writes me a note and goes like, you are never going to believe what my son or daughter did or what I did, that's success to me.
Got it. I love that answer. I think that is so noble. And if there's anybody out there who's skeptical that this kind of stuff matters, as a young person who's been on the receiving end of life-changing advice of that nature, and you might not even think that it's life-changing while you're giving it, you're just saying some observation that you're making about the world. Those things get remembered by people and they really do change lives. So, if there's anyone listening out there who's skeptical about this, I am totally with you. So, thank you for doing that. I assume the people of Lethbridge are very pleased to have their 2 rheumatologists and their 1 pediatrician. That's incredible. So yeah, I love that answer. That is so cool. I do want to follow up on one thing that you said earlier. So I'm a massive Elon Musk fangirl. Like, we have a Tesla. I swear to God, when they get the rockets going to Mars, I'm going to be like the first person on it. So I want to know what you would say to him.
Oh my gosh. I definitely don't want to be a groupie. So I'm going to start with what I wouldn't do and be like, oh, okay. Elon Musk, I follow you. Because I actually don't even have a notification for him on my Twitter or anything like that. I just really respect his mind.
Yeah.
He's so creative, and he has this ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, which is what makes him so creative. And I've had a few people say that I have that same ability sometimes. And so I just love to have a conversation with somebody. I have some ideas and I'd love to hash them out with somebody who can do the same thing. Now, obviously, he's super skilled at it and he's had a lot of years of practice. Something that sticks out is that, like, generally women don't have the opportunity like men do to grow those kind of skills. They have a lot of people who invest in them. They just have a little more freedom to do that. And so I think that that would also be something for a win for women, to be like, hey, you know what? There's some women who have creative thinking, who've been around 100 lives and have some ideas about the world, and just have a conversation. So I do actually have an invention idea. I don't know who would take it up, but I don't know. I'm going to say this on a podcast, but I have a theory that I think it would be hard for a male to come up with. If I'm right, and this theory that I have, if I'm right, it could be used to help grow premature babies. If I'm right, if it could be invested in, it could treat anxiety, like in a profound way that I think would really change the way we look at anxiety, I guess, and the way we raise our children. And so, yeah, I guess I have an invention idea. I want to talk to him about it. That's what I want to talk to him about. I want to say, Elon, what do you think about this?
Got it. Is that something we'll have to wait until a future episode to hear about?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do with that yet. I have vetted the idea out. I have a research team in Calgary that's interested in taking that idea to development. But then it was right before COVID, and they did talk to a lead cardiac specialist at the Toronto Children's Hospital, and they thought there was some validity to what I had to say. But the medical market is, from what I understand, to get anything in medical, like to treat a premature baby, for example, with this idea. Could you just imagine what kind of hoops those have to go through? And to be honest, like I said, I live in this Lethbridge area. I live on a farm, live in the middle of nowhere. It's not like I'm in Silicon Valley. So I need to find somebody who's got connections and can make things happen. It doesn't have to be Elon Musk. I was just saying. Dream big, dream big.
Big fan of Elon Musk. So yes. If you're going to shoot for the stars.
Well, I do have some shares in Tesla though. Yes.
It's interesting what you said about being in Lethbridge and how you're not in Silicon Valley. I think one of the biggest changes that people are seeing right now, precisely because we're not going to offices anymore and we're not meeting people in coffee shops, but we're doing it online through things like Ship 30 and through people's podcast episodes, is that hopefully it'll matter less and less that you're in Lethbridge as opposed to Silicon Valley, and that eventually the probability that if you have a good idea that it'll get floated to someone who's able to do something about it will get flatter and flatter and depend less on where you physically live. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah, there's other challenges that I find working remotely. Like now I have to upload my video, and there's so many things that I have to do myself that takes so much time because I'm working isolated. And so that's the part that I'm finding difficult. Whereas if I was sitting in an office, I could literally, with my assistant, I could be like, hey, can you just do this or grab this off my computer and then take care of this? And so I'm finding as a user, it's so much more work for me to catalog properly, share all the files. There's definitely benefits of being remote. I already was hiring consultants across the world before doing this. Like I was saying to you before we got on the call, I mean, I was Zooming before everybody was Zooming. I mean, the second COVID hit, I was like, I need Zoom shares. Like I knew, right?
Yeah.
So, I've got I had got to work with young adults before the COVID. I don't know if this necessarily has to do with the podcast specific art subject, but one obstacle or hurdle I found is the time change. And I have an assistant right now too, in the Philippines too. And so when I get up first thing is when she's just going to, ending her day. So I have to first thing in the morning, talk to her. Well, I love talking to her, but that used to be my day to be creative. Like when I first get up, I don't go on my phone and all that. And so the time changes made me have to shift my schedule. Well, I'm the one who needs to be at my optimal level first thing in the morning, but I'm adjusting for her schedule. So, and then also too, with young adults, I don't mind when people work for me, you work whatever hours work for you. But if I normally work these hours, I need you to be available sometimes to just have a direct conversation and pick up a phone call. Because texting, I'm a slow typer. I have a bazillion mistakes in my typing. I just want to pick up the call for 10 minutes. That doesn't always work. So there are some hurdles. And I hear this in the business world quite a bit. A lot of, like, I'm from management background, and a lot of people in the leadership world we're trying to figure out, we want to hire flexible workers, but we don't always want to work your flexible hours at 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
So how do we make it work? Right.
Is there anything that, imagine you have like a team of super engineers who can build anything that you want. Is there a solution that you think they could build to this problem? Or do you think it's more a human thing to figure out?
I would have to think about that. I probably could come up with some solutions. I have a few just out of the gate that don't necessarily need some fancy tech app. I think it's just a meeting of the minds and saying, hey, we want to work together as a business owner or manager. We want to make it so that you're optimal, because in my best interest when you're working at your optimal level anyway, if you're going to be happier, you're more going to be satisfied, you're just going to rock it. And so I want that. I want you to rock what you do, because we feel better. You feel good about life when you're rocking what you do. Yeah. So I think though on both sides, just recognizing that maybe it's like you have to be available on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1 and 4. Everybody in the office, no matter what time zone you're on, those days, like even if you got to get up at 2 a.m. to be available or have your phone on in case your boss wants to call you. Yeah. And because I need to be able to just call sometimes, but I also want to be able to work with somebody in the Philippines. Yeah. So
why do you? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask why you think that's so hard to communicate. Like, do you think it's difficult to say to someone, hey, I need you to be available from this time to this time, and it's really important that I be able to call you?
I think the tension that I've got on the other side when I have done it, it's more like, well, you said I could work flexible hours. Well, yeah, I want you to work flexible hours, but that doesn't mean that I have to, like at 10 o'clock at night, they're texting me, asking me questions. Well, I'm not at my computer anymore. I can't necessarily go look it up. Yeah. So I think just for young adults to understand that, because you're living in a specific type of world and it's easy for you. It's easy for you to just whip out a text at 10 and reply, but not necessarily for me, who's maybe talking to my high school kid, or, I'm tired because I've been working all day and I can't work till 10 like all of you anymore. So just understanding each other's worlds. So I think if the leadership can talk like, this is how we work, we're willing to adapt and we want to, but there's only so much we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. It sounds to me like flexible hours isn't really specific enough of a definition, right?
And that's what I think the world needs to figure out. And employers need to figure out and get together and be like, okay, here's some things that worked for us, what didn't. It's pretty new yet because everyone's still haphazardly just applying things. But it would be nice to have some standardizations where you're like, hey, these work, pick A, B, or C. Like I guess what you could come up with is, if you're in office, maybe try this. When you're hiring somebody, this is what your contract says. Because if you say it up front, usually it's good. The issue is that we're learning on the go. And when you go and hire somebody and then a month later go, this is not working, this whole flexible hour thing that I was on board for. And then when you go back and say, hey, this isn't really working, or we need to do it better, then the person you hired is like, but that's not what I agreed to. But the boss is like, but I didn't know, like, we've never done this before.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
tried, but I can't. Like it's costing me huge to, give up my creative
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. It's actually kind of crazy if you think about it, that you just like throw two people from halfway across the world at each other with a set of words that are as fuzzy as flexible hours, and that you somehow magically expect it to work. In fact, it's almost a miracle if it does, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And not
that totally makes
everyone
sense.
is like my generation up isn't used to that, like communicating that way.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. I do have a couple more questions about your podcast, but before I even get to that, I want to go back to something really interesting that you said earlier, which is I think you mentioned that you think it's harder for girls to get a specific set of skills with regards to the type of creative mind that you think Elon Musk has. And I'd love for you to be more specific on that. I'm super curious what you meant.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't put my mind there very much. It's one of those rabbit trails that just pops out. And it's
Yeah.
like, this one's going to be a little controversial. Women have less opportunity to sharpen the skills they have. And so this is going to be hard. I'm just going to do it. Okay. All out today. The Me Too movement, what has done for women in the corporate world is monumental. And I'm not talking about less sexual aggression. I'm talking about mentorship. I'm talking about sharpening skills. I'm talking about the glass ceiling thicker than it was before in many ways. It's like from the business side, one of the things I do, I really gives me great joy is helping people find jobs. I love matching people up. I do it for kick. I just do it for fun. If some of my business friends want to hire somebody, they'll come to me and say, we're looking for someone like this. Do you know anyone? I have a pretty big network. And I'll be like, I actually know someone that fits that. Doesn't always work, but I love matching two people up that's a good fit for each other. But what I'm getting in the last bit is a little bit more of, we're not legally allowed to ask for a male only, but this position requires them to be around males a lot. And so because of all the protocols that have been placed because of Me Too, like now it's like a lot of companies won't let a male and a female work alone anymore. Well, almost all upper management over the years is males.
Okay.
And so I know it took a long way to get there, but so now women aren't getting mentored anymore at the level they were. And if they are, it's with an open door. And we're seeing this across organizations everywhere. So like even in churches where it's like, a pastor can go and take out another pastor or somebody in the church for lunch, or can shut the door if it's like a conversation that needs to happen between two people, but now only with males. So now all of a sudden, no females can go. So females aren't able to access leadership and more mentorship and just not the sharpening. And I think men, from what I hear men saying, is they're just a little more afraid to tell women like, hey, you could sharpen this or you could sharpen that, because they're afraid of being called out. Like they just don't even know what they're going to get called out anymore. Yeah. So that really great movement has turned into something in the background that people just aren't really talking about. So that's one thing that I'm seeing, is that women just have the less opportunity to sharpen. And then of course we all know women often, everybody talks about it takes time to be out. And so I spent a ton of years raising my kids instead of building my brain up in that creative way. I mean, I built it through kids. Like what you learn about the world and people through your children is unbelievably amazing. But I would say that you kind of stall the creative growth that someone like Elon Musk could have done. Like, could you imagine if I wouldn't have taken time out to grow my kids the same way that I did? I would be less knowledgeable in certain areas, but a lot more in others, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. I have two follow-up questions on this. This is so interesting. So the first one is going to be sort of this thing that you mentioned about Me Too putting men and women in a place where they're almost afraid to interact with each other or not allowed to. And I think that's just such an unfortunate way of going about the problem. It's like, using a sledgehammer to hit a nail, because it completely obliviates any faith we might have in the ability of people to do the right thing, right? It's like we have no faith in your ability to handle this like mature adults, so we're just going to prohibit it from happening, which I think is really, really sad, because I really do think people are better than that. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying there.
So just before you go to the other one, I would like to just, if it's okay with you, jump into that one. That you think of the whole suing everybody thing has really changed the world. Like, I get my back up so fast when I hear $1 million payouts for a company for, fairly minor things, because it really can put a company under, and a lot of people rely on those employments. But we see the suing thing across the board, really stifling creativity, stifling relationship building. And so in the case of Me Too, it's not always because they want to do this. It's because of insurance reasons, or companies are enforcing it because they don't want to get sued or they don't want to be liable. And so that has really handcuffed a lot of growing, is this. And I saw that too, like I was saying, I have this autoimmune disease. I spent some time in a wheelchair. That's a whole story in itself, but I almost died, and it was a terrible ordeal. And I had trouble getting doctors to do anything courageous because they're worried about lawsuits.
Oh my gosh,
and I literally sat in an office in Calgary, at a rheumatologist's office, and the doctor looked right at me and said, I can't treat you without the positive blood test. And my particular disease, only 80% test positive with the blood test. So 20% aren't going to get treated, because what the doctor said was, you have tons of time to develop side effects. And because I don't have that blood test, you could come and sue me for them. And literally would not treat me because they were worried about getting sued. Yeah. So when you do the Me Too, it's across the board. We're starting to see a lot of companies, even people publicly. Like a friend of mine was talking to me about how she was upset about what somebody was saying on a podcast. And I mean, people are getting fired for the littlest things.
Yeah.
So it's really muzzling us. And so, yeah, the tension is there for this lawsuit thing. So I'd really like to see a complete revamp of the lawsuit system, but that's probably never going to happen.
No, I agree. I don't think this culture of fear and litigation is ever the right way to solve problems. And it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
And you had one more thing from there that you wanted to continue.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about the second point. So yeah, obviously, if you take, I don't know if it's 9 months or a year or 2 years out of your life to raise children, obviously that's time that you've taken away from progress that you could have been making in your career. I guess my question for you is, why do you think so much of that ends up falling on women? And why do we not hear of men taking, 2-year-long paternity leaves to raise their kids?
Part of why I can run in so many worlds is because I raised kids, because I raised both boys and a girl. So I got both genders. I got a pretty good feel for different genders, but because I stayed home, I worked part-time seasonal when I was raising them, I was able to do hobbies and learn things and grow things. So I didn't hone in on one specific skill, like if I would have done a career specifically in just management or leadership or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I was able to take pruning classes and travel and do wine kits and take courses on writing. And I did my master's. Those are all things I wouldn't have been able to do if I just did a career. So being a mom, if you do it well, and your husband will be supportive, gives you an opportunity to grow in ways that you just wouldn't if you stayed in the workforce. So I just want to say that women who choose to stay home, I could take I took Spanish lessons. I took memory palace lessons. I took everything you could imagine. I've taken a course on probably, which I couldn't have done. So yeah, I think that we just need to see it as an opportunity. Raising kids can give you a serious opportunity. And what I did that was different than a lot of moms do is I literally just brought them with me. So I wanted to learn how to, I even taught my daughter how to prune trees. I took a pruning class because we have this huge acreage because we farm and we're always needing to prune. So I took a pruning class, and then eventually I just taught my daughter how to prune. So you can do things as a parent and just bring them alongside. So that's something I just wanted to say, that it's not a take you out of your career. Sometimes it just builds you in different ways as long as you're willing to optimize on it.
Yeah. Okay. I love this point, and I'll take your statement and make an even stronger version of it, which is I think it's crazy that we have this weird societal blindness around what constitutes a career and what constitutes progress, right? Like someone
Ooh, I
takes,
love that. Oh my
right?
gosh. Okay, let's hashtag that one.
No,
Oh,
but
that's so good.
it's so funny because someone takes a course in, say, Python, and they're like, oh, I've got the certificate in Python, and they list it on their LinkedIn, and they tell all their friends that, like, I'm investing in my skills, right? But as a parent, what are you? You're so many things. You're a life coach, you're a mentor, you're a psychologist, you're all of these things rolled into one. You're picking up all these insane skills, right? And you're learning them firsthand. And it's like a sink or swim kind of situation.
Yeah.
It's probably much more high stress and high stakes than a lot of jobs out there. But we have this weird societal blindness where we don't list that on LinkedIn as like this incredible growth path with all these skills that you pick up, even though you're absolutely doing those things. So no, I think that's a great answer.
Well, even we see women volunteer a lot. It's just, I mean, even if you look at the suffrage movement in the US, it really was about women in who pushed that because they do good in the world, and they're all about, you know, helping, because this is what women do, right? We're all about helping others, and not that men don't, but we just do it in a different way.
Yeah.
One of my friends was saying to me, like, you know, her kids are growing up and thinking about maybe going into the jumping back into just doing something on her own and growing something. She's like, well, what do I put on my resume? Stayed home for the entire time of her kids. Yeah. And the girl volunteers like crazy. Like she can run a 1,500 person event in her sleep because she's part of a large church and she's always running everything. And so really she's an event manager, and she's got a ton of experience doing it, like a ton, and she rocks at it. But there's not really a place on your resume to say, I volunteer event, but she's an event manager. Really, she could probably make some serious money for what she does. And I think that's one of the things with women is the lack of confidence or the ability to see that how transferable that is. Like you and I, that's easy. Like I bet if you talked to her in 2 seconds, you'd be like, obviously you're an event manager. But like, you have to remember, that's not the world they think in. They don't think like that. They think I volunteered and helped out. I helped out. And so I think that like on LinkedIn, I'm starting to see now you can put volunteer on there. So I'm super glad about that. That wasn't on there before. But I think we need to call them. I actually don't like on a resume where it says volunteer. I'd like to push back on that and ask around the world to be like, it should just say transferable skills or something like that. And they're all intermingled. So like I mentored young adults for 2.5 years. For 2.5 years. That's a long time of mentoring, but that would be like on some little, might probably even not make it to my resume. But that's pretty huge in like, really what I should be saying is I listen to the future of the world. Like this is going to sound a little crazy, but in 2019, I was telling pastors around here that they need to prepare for pajama churching. And they were like, what? That's like,
I'm sorry, what is pajama churching?
Okay, so I go to church. I'm Christian, and I was starting to see how young. We're totally getting off base about why I'm doing a podcast, but these are all the things I want to talk about. Oh my gosh, I see trends because I hang out with young adults all the time. They're like my favorite people on the planet, and so I can see that they just want to hang out at home in their pajamas. And there's things going on in the church, like volunteerism. I'm just going to use that. They want to volunteer with their skills, with who they are. They don't want to just like get the water. They want to just be your water girl, you know, especially if they've got some seriously good skills. They can set up your entire small groups on Google Sheets and have everybody share them. You know, they've got great skills, and they're just like, they're saying to the church in this particular case, they're saying to the church, well, you want me, but not the skills I have. Isn't that kind of, doesn't the Bible say we should serve with our giftings? And so there's this kind of this tension here, and they're also want to be able to just do it anytime it works. Like a lot of them work on Sundays now. And so I'm just starting to see a bigger movement. I was starting to see a movement from the young adults of just kind of this, like, I will do church at home. What does that look like? So I started talking to pastors. I'm like, we need to prepare for pajama churching. And like, honestly, you'd think that I should be burned at the stake for saying this. Like, they're like, oh, how could you say such things? Church happens just in a building. I mean, they didn't say exactly those words, but basically. And some of them were like, huh, you know. And then, so this was 2019. I even said it to my member of parliament, my MP locally. I said it in a meeting. So I'm on record saying, pajama church is coming, my friend. We need to get ready for this. And And everyone just laughed. And yeah, guess what happened?
Pajama churching.
March 2020, the entire world went to pajama churching.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who dressed to the T to go to church are now watching church with their coffee in their pajamas with their big slippers. So that's what I love about young adults. So, but how do you tell them that? Like, I think that people who hang out with a lot of young adults, especially my age, I can talk to two generations. I specifically can talk to the older generation, and I can talk to the younger generation. Well, you want those kind of people on your team. And I can help predict the future because I hang out with you all the time.
Thanks for listening to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. We'd love to hear which insights added value to your life or the lives of others. To help support the podcast, please share the love on social media, leave a rating or a review. If you don't want to miss out on exclusive content, sign up for her personal email letters. Check out Samantha's website at samanthapostman.com. Follow her on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks for your amazing support. We'll see you again. And remember, you are meant to live a better and bolder life.